Hello again, Gooners. Yes, I'm back again. I don't know what I've got on my agenda today, but I'm going to talk Arsenal as I do always. What am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about the most exciting captures in the club's history. And in my opinion, I want to hear your opinions on that. And I'm also going to talk about the most disappointing departures. So that's the key to what I'm going to be talking about. Other than that, obviously loads of transfer news. Bit about Yoann Giroud. Uh, some people love to call him De Giroud, which really winds me up. A bit about Yoann Gourcuff. Could he be arriving? Perhaps I'll tell you later. Perhaps I won't. Obviously, I've been looking at loads of transfer stuff. It's a bit of a mess. Ashley Williams, the latest on him, not much to tell. I'm just going to put you out of your misery now. No, I'm not. I'm going to keep you on tenterhooks. What else can I tell you? Antonio Candriva, the latest on him. Not an awful lot to say on it, but something. And just checking my phone now because there were plenty of other things going on. The reason I'm kind of hyped up, if you like, is because I thought I was going to be on a program called Sports Tonight TV, and well, I suggest you check it out. It's part of what's his name, Kelvin Mackenzie's like Talk Sport. I think they're moving into TV now. So I think Kelvin Mackenzie's got something to do with it. I've never met Kelvin Mackenzie, not yet anyway. Perhaps I'll get round to it one day. Who knows? And I was a big fan of Talksport, but the less I've been driving, the less I've been listening to it, to be honest. But I've known a few of the pundits on there. Alan Brazil being one of them. Well, I don't know him that well, to be honest. And then there was, I'm trying to think of his name. Is it McLaughlin or something? There's one of the guys on it. He's nice guy. So yeah, I'm interested in finding out more about what they can do. But I'm going to tell you more about what we're going to be doing on the transfer front. There's one name here that Julio Cesar, of course, is a name that we've been linked with. Well, the whole summer actually, and still nothing's happened. A little joke coming about Julio Cesar. Not from me, I hasten to add. Jamal Raga. I've already said something about him, haven't I? That this 16-year-old Swede has signed for us. That was a while back. But you see, because so little's going on, we're making much ado about nothing, to use the words of Shakespeare. And yeah, what happened to Nani joining us for 8.5 million? Well, I'm just looking through text messages now and saw that. And still hasn't happened. Mignolet, of course, joins Liverpool, so it could be Reyna's joining us. That's what everyone's talking about right now, or perhaps Reyna's going elsewhere. That wouldn't surprise us, would it? Obviously, there are other situations that are really coming to fruition now, like Vito Mannone seems set to join Sunderland. Apparently, he's going to be training with them next week. Well, that's how close it is now. We're talking. Well, for Arsenal, I think training begins the 8th of July, so we've got a bit more time to bring in those new recruits. But if we're going to do business, let's do it before training begins. Let the players get to know their new teammates. Let's not leave it to the last minute. I can see what's going to happen here. We'll start off the season. Actually, with the fixture list we've got, we'll probably do quite well in the opening part of the season. So perhaps we'll decide then we don't even need to reinforce and just let that interest continue. In terms of having that big bank balance, that must be worth a lot of money in terms of interest. But what about points? How many points will we lose without strengthening? Well, that's a big $1 million question, if you like. Anyway, Vito Mannone off to Sunderland. It looks like almost definite that one's going to happen. Mignolet's replacement. Mignolet, obviously, an Arsenal transfer target. For some unknown reason, we decided not to make a move for him. Andrei Arshavin, he's signed for Zenit St. Petersburg, a 2-year deal. I think what a waste of talent, which brought me on to my most disappointing departures. He's in my top 10, by the way. So yeah, as I mentioned before, Reyna being linked with us. Another player who's been linked with us, Benjamin Mendy, 18 years of age, a right back from Le Havre. Sunderland now close to signing him as well. But to be honest, we probably didn't need Mendy because he's a left back. We've already got Gibbs, of course. We've also got Nacho Monreal. And let's not forget Santos. So why would we need another left back? So these are the deals that went through today. Sanchez Watt, we let him go on a free transfer. He's now signed for Colchester. He joins another one of our former players, of course. I can't think of his name all of a sudden. Talented midfielder Craig Eastman. And Julio Cesar is now likely to join Roma. Is that made up or what? Somebody said, who was it said that? I think it's my good friend J Soccer Magazine, Alan Gibson. He came out with some crazy joke on that one. Julio Cesar returning to Rome in triumph, he said, or more likely a BMW. So yeah, he never stops cracking jokes, does he, Alan Gibson of J Soccer Magazine. So so what else have we got? The Metro said that we are now going to put in a bid of £25 million for Wayne Rooney, and I've put hashtag Ripley's Believe It or Not on that one. Clearly, I don't believe it. I don't know about you lot. So the fee for Manoni agreed. I did put this one up, and this is kind of wrong, I've got to be honest. Mauro Zarate of Lazio. Could he be an Arsenal transfer target? He was last year. Could that be rekindled, that flame? Perhaps not. Manchester United were also interested, apparently, but never happened. But the reason why I mentioned that one was because there is another Lazio player that we are, or a player that was on loan at Lazio we've been linked with. That's Antonio Candriva. He's 26 years of age and Italy international. He's done quite well in the Confederations Cup. And as well as ourselves, Manchester United linked with this 26-year-old. He plays mostly on the wing, I think, but I haven't seen a lot of him. I've seen bits of the Confederations Cup, but not every single minute of every single match. So another player we've been linked with, and the player himself has done this really, it's Serge Aurier, and he's 20 years of age, currently plays for Toulouse, and he's a right back. He's posted pictures of himself on Twitter in an Arsenal shirt. So I think he wants to move to us. That's what I would conclude from that. One player moving away, though, is Giroud. He's going to Hamburg. It seems the loan switch more or less agreed. We're going to get £400,000 for this loan deal. And then if the deal becomes permanent, we're looking at £2.1 million for a permanent transfer. So that's a quick roundup of all the deals I've already talked about on Twitter. But as well as that, obviously, the Rooney situation won't go away because I don't think it's ever going to happen. I really can't see him joining Arsenal. But Tony Adams has said that he thinks that Wayne Rooney will struggle being in London. I find that a little bizarre, I've got to say, but you know, who am I to argue with Tony Adams? But he thinks that Wayne Rooney won't enjoy being in London, or perhaps he'll enjoy it too much. Who knows what he means by that? But he reckons that it would be a struggle. I can't really see that. You know, Manchester's a pretty big city as well. It's not as big as London, clearly, but Arsenal take care of their players, and I don't see that as an issue. But what I do see as an issue is the fact that perhaps Wayne Rooney's, I wouldn't say he's past it, like some people have said he's past it. It's ridiculous to say he's past it, but I don't know if he lives the kind of lifestyle that is advocated by Arsene Wenger. And because of that, I don't see that deal actually happening. And then I was looking today at the other clubs and the business they've done in comparison to us. Well, there's Chelsea, they've bought Andre Schürrle. Would that deal excite me? Yeah, a little bit. And then Fulham have even brought in a goalkeeper, Stekelenburg, excellent goalkeeper. Would that excite me? Yes, it would. Then Liverpool, they've brought in Mignolet, who I've really wanted us to sign, Kolo Touré, ex-Arsenal player on a free transfer, Luis Alberto. Would those deals excite me? Yes, they would. Then there's Manchester City. They've brought in Fernandinho and Jesus Navas. Well, Jesus Navas certainly would excite me. And Fernandinho, when you've got a name like that, that's exciting in itself. So yes, again, I would be excited. And even West Ham have bought Andy Carroll. Now, some people say he's not that good. I'm not one of them. I think Andy Carroll's a handful, and he certainly proved that playing against us for Newcastle when he scored a goal, just knocked our goalkeeper, whoever it was at the time. I can't remember. It might have been Chesney. Maybe it was my best friend Fabianski. I think it was Fabianski. Whoever it was, couldn't compete against Andy Carroll. So yeah, I would like to have seen us buy somebody by this stage. But yeah, we once again keeping our powder dry. So are we pleased? No, I'm not. Well then, this is headline of the day for me on HITC. What does that mean? Here is the city. They've got Ashley Williams could be a huge squad player. What is that supposed to mean? That's the funniest headline. I didn't even bother reading the article. Nothing against that website. I think it's quite good. But I didn't bother reading the article because I just thought, what the hell does that mean? A huge squad player. I mean, if he's huge, he's not going to be a squad player. It's a sort of oxymoron, if you like. So a bit of English lit or English language terminology coming in useful there. So so yeah, I was starting to think, what with our unholy triumvirate or triad, or what else do I call them? Unholy trinity of Gervinho, who could be on the way out, Diaby, who will never ever be on the way out, apart from he often spends his time in the sick bay anyway, so what damage can he cause to the club there, apart from on the wages? And then Thomas Rosicky, who a lot of people have a lot of time for. And I just think, we've not seen the best of Thomas Rosicky. Why do we keep him? We've had players that are better than him, like Andre Arshavin. He speaks out of turn, so he never gets a look in. So those players have turned us from the invincibles to the invisibles. See, I just thought I'd throw that out there. I know I'm going to get stick for that, but that's my view. So anyway, I thought today with when I went to what they called Sport Tonight or whatever it is, TV. I thought there might have even been a chance of me meeting Nigel Nutty Winterburn, and so I prepared a few questions for him. I wonder if I'll remember to ask him these questions if I ever do actually meet him. I was going to say, do you think that playing at Wimbledon stunted your technical growth? The reason I say that is because some football fans say that if certain players played for the old Wimbledon, who used to be a bit of kick and rush side really, then it affected them technically. Well, Nigel went on to win a couple of caps for England, and obviously he's a pretty good player, to say the least. So I think the answer to that question would have been no, but I wanted to ask him anyway. And another question, I was going to say, was it hard for him to adjust playing for Arsenal initially, because he had to play at right back as opposed to left back? So that must have been really tough, joining a new club, a big club like Arsenal, and having to do that. And again, he probably would have said yes to that one. And I was going to ask him, why did he take the penalty against Luton at Wembley when Michael Thomas was the designated penalty taker? I think you might struggle to answer that. If anyone knows the answer to that question, do let me know, because I'm still curious. And then I was just going to ask him about the best defence that he played with during his time at Arsenal, expecting the answer to be David Seaman in goal, right back Lee Dixon, and centre backs Tony Adams, and the other centre back would be the interesting one. Would he pick Steve Bold, or would he pick Martin Keown, or would he go for 3 centre backs, and then he wouldn't have to make that choice, would he? I suspect he might have done that, because I don't see, if you're talking about best defences that he played with, it must have been Keown and Bold, I'd say, rather than just one or the other. But if I had to go for one or the other, probably I'd go for Martin Keown, because I think he was an excellent man marker. And I don't know if any of you saw some of the coverage of the BBC, which has been pretty putrid, I have to say. But Martin Keown's spot when he was teaching one of the presenters how to defend during dead ball situations, it was priceless. You really do have to watch it if you get a chance to watch it on iPlayer. I recommend that you do, because Martin Keown clearly knows defending inside out. Why he's not one of our coaches right now, I really do not understand. So yeah, Martin Keown, perhaps he could be a future Arsenal manager. I'm so impressed with his coaching ability, and as a footballer, I thought he was pretty good too. He's one of those players. He would be the least my least favourite player to play against. If I were a striker, I wouldn't want to play against Martin Keown. No way would I fancy that. So one player we've often derided, let's say, Yoann Gourcuff. I haven't personally, but obviously he's on the way to Hamburg, talking to centre backs. And I was going to talk about Gourcuff. 26-year-old Yoann Gourcuff could be on the way to Arsenal, we're hearing, because he's got 1 year left on his current deal. Perhaps now will be the time. We've made inquiries apparently for Maxime Gonalon, but he's not for sale. But Lyon will sell us Gourcuff because he's got only a year left on his contract. So I can sort of half see that happening. But we don't tend to shop in France as much as we once did, so perhaps Newcastle will make moves instead. And then, this is my favourite name of all time, Tin Jedvaj. Now that sounds so made up, that name. Dinamo Zagreb are ready to sell the 17-year-old defender to us. So yeah, get that on the back of your shirt, right? Jedvaj. I dare you. Do it, and say I told you to do it. And then the club shop will be happy anyway. Selling shirts is all good for the bank balance, isn't it? So what was I going to do now? I think after all of that, I was going to read to you I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but I'm going to read to you from In the Shadow of a Giant, Mel Charles, the autobiography of the Arsenal and Wales international legend. And I'm going to pick it up from, I'll try not to do a Welsh accent unless I get the urge, from where he's just about to sign for Arsenal. He says, the irony was I'd gone from playing at the World Cup back to the second division of the Football League, he means, with Swansea. Although the big clubs were moving in with their checkbooks and the Swansea rumour mill had clicked into overdrive, I knew Tottenham had been tracking me for a while, and their manager, Bill Nicholson, made no secret of the fact he desperately wanted to sign me as a centre-half for the side he was painstakingly putting together with silverware in mind. Chelsea were also interested in bringing me back to London, and so too were Arsenal, Newcastle, Manchester United and Leicester, were also said to be monitoring the situation. If I was going to leave Swansea, it was going to be London. That's what he says. I might have imagined that my transfer would be straightforward, but instead it degenerated, should I say, into a circus. It was a long and drawn out affair, and at the end of all the wrangling, it was Arsenal who eventually managed to get one over on Spurs and Chelsea and sign me. As it turned out, signing for Arsenal was the most terrible choice I ever made. That's not the best news I heard, but there you go. When I was at Swansea, we would do our training in the mornings, and a few of us would sometimes go down to the Castle Billiard Hall in the afternoon for a game of snooker. We'd just been going on about our business, having a few frames of snooker, having a laugh and a joke, when I was told there were 3 First Division managers waiting to see me at the top of the stairs. Ted Drake of Chelsea, Bill Nicholson of Tottenham, and Arsenal's manager George Swindon. They were practically pushing and shoving each other to get to the front of the queue at the top of the stairs to have a word with me first. They must have had their orders to win the race to sign me and didn't fancy returning from a long trip to South Wales empty-handed. Trevor Morris was our manager at Swansea at the time, and he told me Ted Drake, of course he's an ex-Arsenal legend as well, Ted Drake fancied signing me because he thought I'd be as good as John, but John Charles, that's his brother of course. But the truth of the matter was that I never really fancied going to Chelsea much. It probably would have been different had I gone to Tottenham though. I think, with the benefit of hindsight, that would have been the ideal move for me, but hindsight is a wonderful thing, and the fates would lead me to a different part of North London from White Hart Lane. I had been Nicholson's #1 target as a centre-half, but as it turned out, Dave Mackay of Hearts went there instead of me, and he didn't do too badly, did he? Tottenham won everything with Mackay as one of their leading lights, and while I admired him as a great player, it always hurt me that it could have been me had destiny worked out differently. I knew how close I'd come to joining Tottenham, and in later years I was consumed with regret, although to be fair, there was a lot of pressure on me at the time, and it was a difficult situation to deal with. Talking of regret, of course, Andre Arshavin doesn't regret anything now that he's gone to Zenit St. Petersburg. He's even admitted he was becoming depressed staying at Arsenal, and you can understand that. Imagine being behind Rosicky in the pecking order. That would have been tough to deal with, I think. Anyway, he continues, it's hard to keep a clear head when deadlines are being set and clubs are doing all they can to woo you with promises. It wasn't ever a case of having the opportunity to sit down and mull carefully over the options in front of you. You didn't have that luxury as a player in the 1950s. I should have gone to White Hart Lane, all right, calm down. Keeps on saying it. I should have gone to White Hart Lane, no doubt about it. But it's far easier to say that now than it was at the time. All of my mates were at Tottenham, and it should have been an easy choice, but Arsenal were extremely persuasive. Oh, we seem to have lost that ability. And they also put together the best deal as far as Swansea were concerned. We seem to have lost that ability too. Even now, I have a strong bond with Arsenal, but although it will irritate some of their supporters, I think Tottenham would have been the perfect club. Okay, he said the same thing about 4 times now. It's starting to wind me up. Sorry, he's a big guy. I'm not going to argue with him though. I remember even after I signed for Arsenal and we were playing Tottenham, Bill Nicholson called me into a little room where they kept all the towels and said, do you still want to come to Tottenham? There would have been hell to pay if that clandestine meeting had got out at the time, as it was a blatant attempt to tap up a player from a rival club. But there was never any danger of me telling anyone. I had far too much respect for him. He was obviously a big admirer, and given what he achieved in football as arguably Tottenham's greatest ever manager, I was and still am flattered that he had so much regard for me. Bill Nicholson was a marvellous character, and I feel I let him down a bit by signing for Arsenal instead. When he missed out on signing me, he didn't let the grass grow under his feet. He was always one step ahead of the game. Instead of wallowing in disappointment at what was looking like a wasted trip to Swansea, he asked Trevor Morris if he could make a call from his office at the Vetch. That was Swansea's old ground, of course. But he wasn't phoning in the bad news to Tottenham. He was working on his plan B. He was straight onto the blower to the heart of Midlothian, up in Edinburgh, to inquire about signing Dave Mackay, a promising central defender. And apparently, he never paid Trevor a penny for that call either. He was a fast thinker, true enough, and in getting Mackay from Hearts he pulled off a masterstroke, as history now shows. My transfer from Swansea to Arsenal was emotionally draining, and I was back page news every day of the week as the drama unfolded. It all started to come to a head when I asked the club if I could have a part-time job outside of football to give me more of an income. It was an idea they had raised with me in the past, and it seemed like everyone would be a winner. I'd get to stay at Swansea and they'd keep their captain. The wages were capped at £14 a week at the Swans, with no room for negotiation, and the way I saw it, if I could get another job, it would give me just enough to stay with Swansea rather than having to go and sign for someone else. I reckon that as an international who'd played in the World Cup, I was entitled to First Division wages, and for a while Swansea told me they were going to set me up as manager of a garage to help complement what I was already earning at the club. But although they kept promising they'd fix something up, nothing materialised, and it came to the stage where I told him put up or shut up. When I was met with a stony silence, I had no option but hand in the transfer request because I already knew there were a few clubs keen on signing me. There was another problem to throw into the mix too. The Football League were having kittens when they heard about my request for a part-time job, as they were worried it would open up the floodgates with dozens of other players ready to sit up and take notice and hand in similar requests. The league made it clear in no uncertain terms they would do everything in their power to oppose the idea. Well, having said that, I can tell you in the 60s there were a lot of players that were part-time taxi cab drivers. Trust me, I know this. So I'm a bit surprised that about what's his name again? Mel Charles. Mel Charles finding that he couldn't do a part-time job. It seems bizarre because plenty of other players were doing that. Anyway, he said, I was the first player to have something resembling an agent. A local solicitor called Neil Harris, who I employed, it should be whom I think, whom I employed for the transfer only. He was loosely described as my business manager in the newspapers, but he was given the cold shoulder by all the clubs involved and the Football League, who were very suspicious of so-called outsiders becoming involved in negotiations. Transfers were usually completed after a bit of haggling between the clubs concerned. There were never any middlemen or agents back then, so for me to hire Harris was a bit groundbreaking. Not that it did much good for me. For the privilege of signing for the mighty Arsenal, all I got was a £20 signing on fee. I can still picture the money now, 4 crisp old fivers. And the thing was, I remember being pretty made up at the time. I thought it was a bit of a result. We didn't really know much about money in those days. My wages at Swansea had been £14 a week during the season and 12 in the summer. But out of that £14 you still had to pay rent and all your outgoings. I started off on £16 a week at Arsenal, went up to £20, and he says, no wonder I'm skint now. I think Patrick Vieira and Thierry Henry probably made £20 in less than a minute during their time at Arsenal. The actual signing talks with Arsenal were a bit unusual. We decided it would make sense to meet somewhere away from London or Swansea, so we chose a quiet cafe in Cowbridge, a little town in the Vale of Glamorgan. When I went up there to speak to George Swindon, the Arsenal boss, he had his captain Tommy Docherty with him to help add weight to his powers of persuasion, along with Peter Davis and Dave Dodson, the 2 Arsenal reserves who were central to the deal going ahead as a cash plus player transfer. Dave Dodson had never even been to Wales before, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to play some mind games with him to test whether he really did want to go through with this move. When I got a chance, I followed him to the toilet and asked for a quick word. I said to him, Dave, have you ever been to Swansea? When he said no, I said, it's all bloody coal mines there. You don't want to go there. It's a rotten place. It's not for you, Dave. I'd steer well clear if I was you. I tried to put him off because if he backed out, the deal might have been off and I'd be able to wriggle out of it too. But it was just my luck. Peter Davis was from Llanelli and he was dying to get back to Wales. Tommy Docherty had come down with George to help seal the deal, and together they put over a passionate case for me to move to Arsenal. After the meeting at Cowbridge, I was still none the wiser as to whether the deal between Arsenal and Swansea would be done or not. But I didn't have to wait too long to find out. The very next morning at 9 o'clock, I got a knock on the door and the physio Bernard Sherrington was standing there. He said, Mel, you've got to come to Cardiff with me today. I said, I don't know if you talk like that, but it sounds good. I said, what for? And he said, you're going there to sign for Arsenal. No arguments, no more negotiations, nothing. I was just told to get my coat on because I was going to Arsenal. A knock at the door and you're gone, away to a new club. The wheels had been set in motion 9th of March 1959 when Swansea formally decided Mel Charles was up for sale to the highest bidder. This is how it panned out on a day-to-day basis, and the following reports appeared in the sports pages of the South Wales Evening Post. With hardly any television sets in the town, This was the closest thing to a soap opera. 9th of March, it says, Swansea Town say Mel can go. And then it says, Swansea Town manager Trevor Morris has been given a free hand to deal with Mel Charles' application for a transfer, and the club has agreed to his request, but on their terms. Their hands have been forced by Charles' insistence. He wants a part-time job outside of his contract, and that he wishes to play First Division football. In an interview with the manager today, Charles repeated these demands. An official statement was released by the club saying, in view of all the relevant circumstances, we feel we should accede to Charles' request for a transfer. Naturally, we are talking a record transfer fee, but we would much prefer a cash plus player deal in preference to straight cash, as it is essential we should get the right replacements in. There are half a dozen clubs whom we have pledged to notify. They have been acquainted of the position, and now it's up to them. Manager Morris today contacted the clubs who have shown an interest. Among them are Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, Newcastle, Manchester United, even though Matt Busby has publicly stated he doesn't want to sign any new men this season. One thing certain, if the club does not get a satisfactory deal, then Mel Charles will stay at the Vetch. Then the following day, League hand out a warning, demand for part-time job, asking for trouble. That's the headline. Swansea Town's decision to grant Mel Charles' request for a transfer has taken a new turn. Football League President Mr. Joe Richards has warned that any player requesting a part-time job outside of football is asking for trouble. There seems little doubt that the league is watching the position closely. There is a question of principle involved, and if Swansea had agreed to Charles' request for a part-time job, they would have only opened the way for other players to do the same. The league has made it clear that any provision for a part-time job is illegal. Charles' reaction to Swansea's official statement, published in the Evening Post, has not been favourable. It is ridiculous, he said. No player is worth £50,000. I put my value at half that figure, and if Swansea persist in asking for so much, I shall take the matter to the league. And Swansea Town manager Trevor Morris said today, the position is perfectly clear. Charles and his behind-the-scenes advisors asked for a transfer and forced us into acceding to it. We reserve the right to put our valuation on him. If we don't get it, Charles stays, and that's that. In the meantime, Arsenal and Tottenham have made inquiries. George Swindon, the Arsenal chief, was stated that he was on his way to Swansea. He said, I'm not interested in anything like a £50,000 fee, but we are prepared to do business on a player exchange basis. Tottenham, who have already got two former Swan stars, Terry Medwin and Cliff Jones, on their staff, are holding a special meeting and are sure to make a bid for Charles. Leicester boss Mike Gillis has made an offer of £20,000 plus one of 5 players. Following day, this was in the news. Now Chelsea join in. Ted Drake makes trip to Vetchfield. Chelsea joined the Mel Charles race today, and their manager Ted Drake arrived at the Vetchfield late this afternoon. The London club, who have not entered the transfer market for some time, unlike nowadays, of course. Now roles are reversed, aren't they? They should have plenty to offer in exchange for the Wales international. Apart from the cash side, which shouldn't present too much of a headache to the wealthy pensioners, Chelsea pensioners, of course, was their nickname back then. They have several players whom they could offer in exchange. Swansea had a bird's eye last week of the men Chelsea might offer, for the latter club's reserve side won 3-2 at the Vetchfield. Meanwhile, Arsenal are not letting the grass grow under their feet. Today, in the absence of their manager George Swindon, who left for Nottingham with his reserve team, Secretary Bob Walls stated, Mr. Swindon discussed various aspects of the transfer with Swansea Town manager, because it was Swansea Town back then, Trevor Morris. Our board will now consider the matter, and dependent on their consideration, within the next few days, we may decide to make a firm offer. The following day, 12th of March. Spurs are the favourites, Arsenal, say Charles, but the Tottenham bid tops the lot. I'm not too sure I understand that headline, but anyway, let's read on and see if it makes sense. Although Mel Charles has stated that he wants to be transferred to Arsenal, Tottenham came in this morning with what is a far more attractive bid and are now favourites to obtain the Swansea player. Spurs boss Bill Nicholson, who has already got 2 former Swansea players on his books, and Terry Medwin and Cliff Jones, is on his way to Swansea. He will offer a player who is in the first team plus a substantial fee. There seems little doubt that the 2 clubs will come to terms. Arsenal are, of course, in the field. They've made a straight cash offer of £35,000 plus a couple of young players. In the meantime, George Swindon, accompanied by Tommy Docherty, took the opportunity of seeing Charles and had a long chat with the player and his wife at his home. I very much want Charles as a centre-back so that I can build my team around him, said Swindon. I've wanted him for a long time and I'm not worried about the deadline for signing. Charles had this to say of his chat with Mr. Swindon. He has more or less talked me into going to Arsenal. I won't go anywhere but Arsenal. Nothing will change my mind. 13th of March. Mel Charles adamant. So now it's deadlock even. Unless Mel Charles changes his mind today, he will remain with Swansea. He had a 2-hour talk with Spurs boss Bill Nicholson last night, but remained adamant about wanting to go to Arsenal. I told Mr. Nicholson that I'd made my mind up to go to Arsenal, said Charles. It's always been my ambition to join them. Manager Trevor Morris has not changed his views either. Tottenham made the best offer, which we accepted. Newcastle were last in with an offer of a cheque plus centre-forward Curry and full-back McKinney. But Mr. Charlie Mitten, the Newcastle manager, was told we had already agreed to Tottenham's terms. The Tottenham offer was obviously the one that appealed most to Swansea, but on the 14th of March they got sick of waiting. Bill Nicholson made his famous phone call to Hearts and instead signed Dave Mackay instead as a perfect alternative. Spurs had officially lost interest because I'd already gone on record saying the Arsenal bid appealed to me more. While this transfer tug-of-war raged on, I was still doing my best to concentrate on football and playing for the Swans. That month we recorded a famous win over Cardiff at Ninian Park, recording Swansea's first ever league win at the ground and our first ever league goal. Mel Nurse, who was only 21 at the time, had the honour of scoring that historic goal from the penalty spot. It was enough for us to win 1-0. So it's all about Swansea for a bit. But then he says, with Tottenham out of the running, the path was more or less clear for Arsenal, although my business manager, Neil Harris, was still keen on setting up a meeting with Newcastle and the Football League on Good Friday to hear what they had to offer. The Football League had made him a sworn enemy at that stage, and they released a statement from Secretary Alan Hardacre, which read, the Football League is not interested in meeting Neil Harris. As far as the Football League is concerned, he has nothing to do with the transfer of any Football League player. Not in any circumstances would the league meet him. And Newcastle knew they were chasing a lost cause, and when Arsenal came back with a new improved offer and threw a couple of players into the mix, the deal was well and truly swung in their favour. Their offer was Peter Davis and Dave Dodson, together with a then British transfer record fee of £42,750, and that was enough for Swansea to decide it was a done deal. Dave Dodson was an ex-England youth winger, and he ended up scoring 11 goals in 30 games for Swansea before he was sold to Portsmouth for £4,000 in December 1961. Things worked out a little better at the Vetch for Peter Davis, who helped the Swans win the Welsh Cup in 1961 and played 134 league games for the club. He moved on to Brighton in July 65 and also played in South Africa later in his career, but he came back to live in Swansea and ran a few pubs around the town, including the Bay View on Oystermouth Road. After a mad month of transfer wrangling, I finally had closure and I signed for Arsenal on the 31st of March 1959. Leaving Swansea was a wrench, but the truth was that a combination of circumstances forced me to go to Arsenal. You didn't have the bargaining power at your disposal as a player back then as you do now. The situation had escalated so quickly that I had to go, or Swansea could have reacted badly to having a contract rebel on their hands and decided to put me out of football. It didn't help either that I had a manager who was hell-bent on being in control of the transfer. There were times during the negotiations when Trevor Morris was a real pain in the backside to deal with, and he was more intent on getting his way than me getting mine. He was remarkably stubborn and tried to play hardball throughout. He treated me like a commodity rather than a person. I think his record as a selling manager rather than one who wanted to build and nurture a good team speaks for itself. 7 internationals left the Vetch field during his time in charge, and while he might have brought in a few quid for Swansea, there's no doubt the fans would have preferred to see their favourites stay. Try as I might throughout my career, I could never shake off the nagging feeling of what might have been had I decided, oh no, he's still going on about Tottenham. At the time, Tottenham had Cliffy Jones and Terry Medwin at the club and another one of my international teammates, Mel Hopkins, who had signed from the famous Ystrad boys in Ronda. It was a shame for Mel Hopkins. He missed out on the double season with Spurs because he'd smashed his nose in a game against Scotland in a collision with Ian St John. It was a hell of a mess after that, a really bad one, and put him out for months. So, yeah, he's still going on about Tottenham. I'm going to miss that paragraph, which is nearly completely about Spurs, but we're nearly at the end of this chapter. But anyways, while I often wonder how it would have worked out with Spurs, I'm probably wasting my time dwelling on the past. It was Arsenal who signed me, and despite my numerous ups and downs at Highbury, I'm still very fond of them to this day. So glad to hear it, Mel. When I get the newspaper or watch the results coming in on TV, straight away I look for my old clubs, and that includes Arsenal. I get a lot of stick about my Arsenal connection from some of the punters in my local boozer the badminton bar in the Sandfields area of Swansea. You'll get folk that support every other club under the sun trying to wind me up about Arsenal, and I've got a bit of a running bet with the barmaid who's a mad keen Liverpool fan. Every time Liverpool and Arsenal are playing, it's a straight bet between her and me of 1 pint to the team who does best. She'll say otherwise, but I'd say I'm well ahead of her on the number of pints I won at her expense. I think I must owe 1 or 2 of them to Mr. Arsene Wenger. Arsenal are still a great club, but there's no doubt they've changed beyond all recognition from the team I signed for in 1959. They were always a club with a great tradition, but they didn't have the cosmopolitan flair that guys like Wenger, Thierry Henry and Patrick Vieira have brought them in recent years. The new batch of kids that Arsene Wenger is bringing through now look to be a bit special too, and it's good to see them up near the top of the league every season, because I know only too well that wasn't always the case. They've also moved away from Highbury, of course, and while I love the old ground and its unique atmosphere, I wouldn't mind seeing what the Emirates Stadium is like, just to compare the two. I'm not a fan of the big shiny new grounds, but I always have a place in my heart for Arsenal, and it was an honour to play for them. And his next chapter is about the Highbury High Life, and it's interesting that he was saying how well we were doing. This was published in 2009, so well, we've not done too badly, have we? Since still finishing 4th, still above you know who. Right, until the next time, I will say in football parlance, away up the Gooners.